Greetings, QCS Build fans, and welcome to my dining room. So, we're filming in the dining room. It's really echoing here because there's not a lot of sound deadening. But you'll just have to bear with for the intro. Later on through the video, I'm going to be overlaying narration on it, so you won't have to be worried about the echo and the AC kicking on all the time. So anyways, as you can see, there's something big and black behind me. So this is a TCL 65S4 Roku LED TV. This one has bad backlight. So we're going to change the backlight on it today. So it's not a hard process necessarily. It's a very long, tedious, intensive process. So this is like, golly, this is, I don't know how many of these I've done already. It's more than 5 and less than 50, so something like that. Anyways, so we're gonna go through how to do this. So if you're ambitious enough, you'll be able to kind of follow along and get an idea of how to do this. TCL, Hisense, those two brands in particular are one of the biggest culprits of this kind of failure, because unfortunately those two particular brands use very inexpensive, cheap backlights. So hence they don't last very long, and so they tend to burn out. So yeah, we end up doing a lot of these. Fortunately, this panel is actually one of the easier ones to tear apart. If you ever have to do this on a Vizio, it's a little more complicated. If you have to do it on a Samsung, it's probably the worst, because like a QLED is a major pain. And of course on an OLED, guess what? There is no backlight. So you don't have to worry about it, right? Anyway, so couple things that you're gonna need to be able to do this. One, you need a very big, huge room. We're literally in my dining room. The camera is sitting on my tripod on my kitchen island. So yeah, this is a big room. This TV is currently sitting on an 8-foot iceberg folding table. My dining room table is back behind there, which is like almost 5 by 5 square. So it's sitting back there. So you need a big room to be able to do this. Ideally, it needs to be clean, and also too, it needs to be dust free. Because when you pull this apart and you take the glass off and the lenses and everything else, last thing you want is dust, hair, whatever getting inside the set. Because once it's in there, and if you don't clean it before you reassemble it, guess what? It's permanently in there unless you want to tear it all back apart again. Most people aren't going to want to do that. So you need a very large clean area to be able to do this in. Doesn't have to be a clean room. You know, I've done tons of these in here all the time. Not a problem. The other is you're going to need some tools. So you're going to need a standard number 2 screwdriver, number 2 Phillips screwdriver, and you're going to need a precision screwdriver. I like using these little huskies with the removable ends, just because it gives you a number 1, a 0, and a double aught precision end on it in a Phillips. That you're going to need, because there's some screws in here that this won't take out. Ideally, if it's magnetized or slightly magnetic, it does help. So that's 2 things you're going to need. You're also going to need suction cups. Now these are standard tile installation suction cups that you would get at, say, Home Depot or Lowe's. And they run about, I think these run about 15, 20 bucks, something like that. They work perfectly fine. If you're working on something bigger than a 65, you would want probably 2 pairs of these instead of just the 1 pair. because anything bigger than 65 is hard to handle by yourself. So we've done a couple of 70s, and 70s get a little on the difficult side, and those were Visios. So yeah, you're gonna need suction cups. The other thing that I would highly recommend, you don't necessarily need this, but I would very, very much recommend it because it's going to save you a lot of scratching your head and or pulling your hair out, is going to be an LED backlight tester. Now these, you can get them on eBay, you can get them on shopjimmy.com. That's where the parts for all this came from. They're probably by far your most reliable place to go online to get TV parts, no matter where it is, unless you're in the repair business. Then there's Encompass is a good one to go get parts from, but Shop Jimmy has an entire searchable catalog by model number, and not only by model number, but they'll also give you. So say a specific model number comes with 4 different main boards, it will tell you what serial numbers to look for to know which one's going to work with your set. So yeah, Shop Jimmy all day long. That and their warranty exchange and everything is super, super simple. Recommend them all day long if you need parts for any kind of TV. So they even have remotes, backlights, all kinds of stuff. So yeah, definitely recommend them all day long. And then that's basically it. So, oh wait, there's one very important thing you need. Time. So this takes me anywhere from 3.5 to 5 hours to do this. So you need time. If you've never done this before, it's probably going to take you anywhere from, I would say 4, if you're fairly technically proficient, to 6 hours to probably do this. First time I did it, it took me 5.5 hours, and I did it on the floor of a customer's house. Don't recommend doing that. It's hell on your knees. But that's why I bring it back here. Makes life way simpler. It's easier on the back too. But yeah, so I would totally recommend allowing a good amount of time. You need at least half a day, if not more, to be able to do this. So, and the last thing you want to do is have to stop halfway through and then put it all back together again. Because once you kind of get in a rhythm and you kind of get all your parts and everything laid out, you want to just be able to kind of go back and move along. So, all right. Well, with that said, let's get started. Oh, one more thing. This is a 65. You can see I'm moving a 65-inch TV around fairly easily. I'm also 6 foot tall. Okay? If you got a big wingspan like I do, this isn't an issue. But if you're probably below the height of about 5'10", get a second person to do this. Because otherwise, you're probably either A, going to hurt yourself, or B, you're going to hurt the set. And you're probably going to be more frustrated if you hurt the set in the short term than if you hurt yourself. So, words of advice. If this was any bigger than a 65, I wouldn't be doing this. By myself, that is.
Alright, so getting started, I'm going to go ahead and take the stands off. And you'll notice that I like to lay my parts out on either side of the set, depending on where they came from. So that way it keeps everything nice and organized. Then we're going to go ahead and take the screws out that hold on the lower back half. This cover panel is what covers up the main board and the power supply and the T-conn board and all the cables. Now lift the top side up just a little bit because there's like a little latch kind of hook tab underneath there. Only lift it up part way and then disconnect the cables for the IR receiver board, the power button, and the speakers. TCL and Vizio are notorious for this kind of back design, and so if you try to walk away with that, you're going to end up breaking some cables. At this point, we'll go ahead and we'll also take off the wall mount mounting lugs on the set because we're going to need to lay this set on its back flat, and those lugs will keep us from being able to do that. Also then go ahead and take off the stand mounts. Okay, at this point go ahead and disconnect the power cable that runs from the power supply to the main board. The red connector on the power supply does tend to be slightly fragile at times, so make sure you completely depress the lock before you start to try to wiggle that cable out of the socket. And then we're going to go ahead and untape the power supply to mainboard cable. Although I wouldn't recommend removing the tape entirely. The tape will not get in your way. I would just lightly tack it back down and you'll be fine. Then go ahead and undo your LVDS. Then go ahead and undo your T-conn to buffer cables at the lower buffer. And remove your T-conn board. At this point, we're going to go ahead and we're going to undo the cable connection for the wireless card. This particular unit, you're going to have to remove the wireless card from the retainer holder to gain access to the screw that holds the retainer holder in place. Also, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to undo the wireless antenna. This is the same type of antenna system that is used in a laptop. So if you've ever worked on a laptop, it's the same kind of gold, very small coaxial connector that just snaps into place. Remove the screw and then snap your wireless card back into the retainer so that way it doesn't get lost, and set the screw with it. Okay, at this point we can go ahead and we can remove the main board. Be sure to untape the wireless cable and then gently peel the LVDS cable off the back of the set. This particular unit, they use a foam block with double-sided adhesive on either end as kind of a support for the LVDS cable. LVDS cables do tend to be fairly fragile, so they don't tend to like to be pulled on a lot. So you do want to be careful with it. Now at this point, we'll go ahead and we're going to take the screws, the larger screws out for the lower buffer. On this particular set, the two lower buffer shields actually overlap, so we're going to remove the right one first, and then we'll remove the left one. And then we're going to remove the smaller screws on the lower side of the shield. And these are a number 1 Phillips screw. And makes your life a little bit easier because they don't want to come out very easily. To loosen those up and take them out with a magnetic screwdriver or a magnetic pickup stick or whatever you have that'll actually pick things up. You can also see that I removed the shields from where the power supply was. These literally just sit on there in a little groove around the mounting nubs. What those are for is to keep the power supply from shorting itself out against the back of the set. So make sure you don't lose those, because you will need to put those back, because if you don't, odds are you're going to take a chance of possibly shorting the power supply out against the back of the set. Then just gently peel the shield off of the buffer. We don't want to pull hard, we just want to kind of roll it down and off very slowly and gently. And then repeat the same process with the left side. The buffers are basically only attached to the set with some tape, a couple of retaining clips, and the ribbon cables for the panel itself. This is the part where we start to get into the more dangerous end of this repair, because the cables that are attached to the panel from the buffer are extremely fragile, and if those get damaged, then you're gonna have a bad day. Now I'm taking the gold silver grounding tape and I am removing it from the buffer. This is grounding tape that actually holds, it does two functions. One, it holds the buffer in place, but also two, it acts like a ground conduit for the buffer board to the back of the set. That way, in case of static shock or anything, the charge doesn't go directly to the panel or the buffer, it just goes to the back of the set and then grounds itself out through the power supply. And then very gently lift the buffers up out of the retaining clips, which are kind of a soft plastic. Now we can go ahead and remove the screws going around the outer frame of the set. And take out the two lower frame screws and then gently popping off the lower frame, which is also taped on. So when you pop it off, I'm going to gently pull and it will unpeel the grounding tape below it. And then roll the buffer all the way over and just let it kind of hang off the panel cables, which is perfectly fine. The buffers don't weigh very much, and so they won't put that much strain on the cables. And we're going to flip the set back over. At this point, it is going to be easier to disassemble the rest of the set sitting right side up on its back. Remember, use 2 people if necessary to move this thing around, and you want to make sure you flip it with the buffers in the air at the entire time. Do not set the set down on those buffers. You take a high chance of breaking them, and those are not replaceable. Then you can slowly peel the outer frame away and slide it out.
Okay, sorry about that. I had a little camera goof, so, but, okay, we're gonna do this. I'm gonna take your hands free for a second, and I will show you. Okay, so you can see I already flipped the TV over. The other thing is I already took off the protective strip. So this strip, this little piece of filament tape is what covers this guy. If you gently peel it off at an angle in kind of this direction like this, it will come off pretty easily with one of these. But it covers these little tabs right here that go all the way down the side of the set on both sides, and you're good. So, all right, on with the show.
So at this point, take a microfiber cloth and lightly wipe down the set of any dust, because when we place the suction cups on the screen to pull the screen off of the panel, we do not want any dust or anything on the screen, because if the suction cups shift for any reason, it will be very likely that it'll scratch the screen. Also, too, if you get enough dust on there, it can keep the suction cups from attaching to the screen easily. So I like to place one in the left center and one in the right center of the set. Push down firmly and lock your suction cups into place. And then very gently and slowly begin to lift it up. Now, this particular set, you can see everything's coming up except for the very top, which is where I stop because it feels like the glass is sticking. And that's because, well, it is. Some manufacturers will use a little bit of double-sided assembly tape to attach the glass to the frame so that way it doesn't move around during assembly. This is extremely annoying for the service world. If you try to pull this off very quickly, it will break the glass, or it will damage the filament inside the glass and the conductor layer. So that is a big problem. So I repositioned the suction cups to move to be able to gently pull the glass away from the adhesive. And I'm going to use the filament tape to cover the adhesive, so then that way when I go to reposition the suction cups and actually take the glass off, then it won't try to constantly re-stick to the adhesive at the top of the set. Then go ahead and gently pull up. Make sure you slide everything down because you do not want the buffers to catch on the frame or in the back of the panel, and set it flat down on a flat table. Unlock your suction cups and you're good to go. Now as we disassemble this, we'll disassemble it like a layer cake, and that would make it easy for us to put everything back together in the same order. Go ahead and remove the filament tape. And then we can proceed to unclip the inner frame, the inner support frame from the panel. Now this inner support frame is basically kind of a firm rubber, and so it just has little pressure clips that you roll off and peel it off. Here you can see the double-sided adhesive tape that is still stuck to that frame strip, and there is no taking that off. Like a lot of things in this process, it's there for a reason. Don't remove it if you don't have to. Then go ahead and take the bottom inner frame strip off. And because these inner frame strips, they overlap, you have to take off the top and the bottom, and then you can take off the sides. And if you notice on the table, I've set the uppers on one part of the screen, and I've set the sides on the other part of the screen, just to keep them separated. Now we can go ahead and we can take off the polarization lenses or filter lenses. There is a piece of assembly tape at the very top center, and you can just gently peel that back off, leaving it attached to the frame. With all the tape, I don't like to take the tape totally off, because then it's hard to remember exactly where it goes when you reassemble everything. And then gently peel that off and lay it on top of the glass. This will do two things. One, it'll protect the glass while we're working on the panel, and it will also keep it so it's easy to reassemble later. At this point, you can pull off the diffuser layer, which is kind of a thick piece of plastic, and gently set it down. You can see I had a little trouble with the bottom sticking, and that's because, again, they had a piece of double-sided adhesive tape holding the diffuser in place. A lot of lesser expensive sets, they'll use a lot of tape just because of the fact that they will the different pieces of the panel do not sit inside the panel frame perfectly. As you can see, now we can remove the standoffs, the acrylic standoffs on these. On this TCL, they're actually screwed in, so we can just remove the screw and remove the standoff at the same time. Other sets like Visio's, LG's, and Samsung's, a lot of times they snap or they twist lock into place. Now we can go ahead and we can remove the reflector screen in the very back of the panel. Go ahead and gently, very gently and slowly peel the reflector screen off of the double-sided tape. Do not get in a hurry with this part, because if you do, you take a high chance of tearing the deflector screen or reflector screen. So you want to loosen up the corners, and then you can just lift and peel the whole thing totally off. And then be sure to set the adhesive side up, because you do not want that adhesive sticking to anything. Okay, at this point we're going to take our backlight tester and we are going to test our individual LED strips. Where the Molex connector connects to the LED strip, there is usually a plus and a minus copper conductor test point on each strip. And what I'm doing is I am pressing my positive and negative, my red and my black test probes onto those test points, and it is lighting up the test strips or the LED strips to basically maximum brightness. And the tester will actually give you a reading of the amount of voltage it takes to run each backlight strip to its maximum voltage. In this particular case, these were 43.2 to 43.4 volts. Each strip should be within plus or minus 10% of each other. If it's any more than that, it will cause an imbalance inside the power supply, and will usually cause either the power supply to fail or the power supply to safety fault. And right here, we're testing the last strip, and this is our bad strip right there, because that one doesn't light up at all. Now we can go ahead, since we've identified the failed strip, we can go ahead and take the nylon filament tape, gently peel it from the backlight strip, gently undo the Molex connector from the backlight strip, which does have a lock, so you have to press down or squeeze the connector to get it to unlock, and then gently slide it out. And then you peel the backlight strip from the back panel. You can see as I did that, the lenses for the LEDs came off the backlight strip. This is totally normal. Do not freak out over this. If anything, the backlight lenses make good like fishing lures or something for a project. But or might look good in the bottom of your acquarium, but they are just super glued on to the top of the strip. So when the strip peels off, and because it bends the way it does, it usually will end up popping most of those strips off of there, or most of the lenses off of there. Then go ahead and align the strip in the same orientation as the new strip, in the same orientation as you remove the old strip. Plug it in, and this is where the tester comes in handy, because I always prefer to test and verify as I repair and reassemble the set. Now with new strips, usually they take a little bit of time to kind of warm up and actually gain full voltage. The other issue too is sometimes you just need to push a little harder to get a really good contact on the test points when they're new. And we can see we got a good functioning strip, and then we're gonna go ahead and press the strip the rest of the way onto the back of the panel. Now, at this point, if this was your own personal set that you were repairing, you could go ahead and you could stop at this point, because the new strip is at 43.2 and the old strips are at 43.3 to 43.4. So they're perfectly within tolerance and they're perfectly functional. Now, so you could stop at this point and be perfectly fine, and it would save you probably another half an hour of time from having to remove all the rest of the strips, test them, and reassemble the set back together. However, if you are doing this professionally, or you are doing this for a customer, do not stop at that point. Replace all the strips. There's two reasons for this. One, when one strip goes, the others are usually slowly to progressively follow later on. And the reason being for that is because the strips are made in batches. And so usually, in this case, the 6 strips that came assembled in this TV are all from the same batch. Now you can see I'm testing the entire left and right array and make sure they light up. So that way when we plug the power supply in, it'll be good. Now we can reverse the process and put it all back together. This part is a little tricky. Sometimes you have to kind of fidget with the reflector screen to get it to line up correctly inside the panel frame. And so what I'm doing is making sure that everything lines up like it's supposed to. And because of the tape, and you see me fluffing it basically, to try to get it to line up right. And what I'm doing is I'm fighting the tape to keep it from sticking to the panel as I'm trying to get it to center and align like it's supposed to be. If it's not aligned properly, then what will happen is you won't be able to get your screw holes to line up with the back panel when you go to put the acrylic standoffs and everything back on. And there we go. Now I'm just checking everything, making sure it's totally lined up. Once I'm sure it's totally lined up, then I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to lightly press down on the adhesive strips and kind of center it into place. You want to do this kind of from the inside out, so you notice I'm doing the strips first. And then I'll go around and I will do the corners. And pressing it all back in. Biggest reason for doing it in this fashion is we're trying to not create any creases or wrinkles inside the reflector, because you can create dark spots inside the TV depending on the model. If the reflector has a crease or is not totally flat. Then we're going to go ahead and we're going to reattach our acrylic standoffs. Make sure these are firmly installed and in place. If you don't put these in, the rest of the panel will not go back together right. These are highly important because this is what keeps the diffuser screen from folding into the backlights, and also keeps the rest of the outer screen flat. Now we can go ahead and reinstall our diffuser. Now the rest of these pieces, they do need to be nearly perfectly centered inside the panel, or as much as humanly possible. Then we can go ahead and reinstall our filters. And these are multi-layer, so there's actually about 4 to 6 sheets of filter material that I'm actually holding right there. I always try to remove it and install it as one piece, so then that way, 1, you don't get dust between the layers, but 2, it's just easier to manage and install that way. Also, go ahead and reattach the assembly tape to the filters, and then walk around and make sure there's little notches that the back panel actually goes through, and that's what I'm doing here. Is I'm actually taking my finger and I am pushing the panel, the filters either towards the center to get the little locking tabs to go around the lip. Of the panel that's actually the panel frame that actually sticks up. Okay, now we can go ahead and we can reinstall our inner frame strips. One thing that does tend to come in handy is if this is your first time doing this, take pictures as you go, especially of key alignment points for everything, because it'll make the reassembly process that much easier for you. For me, on the other hand, I've done this several times, and so it's not, and where most TVs basically come apart and reassemble in the same fashion all the time. It's just remembering the different little idiosyncrasies of each model. So you can go ahead and reinstall the lower and the upper inner frame. One part that I didn't show very well in this video, there is black tape that actually holds the lower and the inner panel frame to the panel. It's assembly tape. Go ahead and make sure that gets reinstalled. Okay, at this point, we can go ahead and we can reinstall our glass. And you can see the glass has sectioned itself to my table. And so now I have to be very gentle as to try and break the section off my table. Okay. And you can see I overshoot and I bring it back. So then that way I'm not setting the glass straight down, because I need to hook in the buffers on the bottom side of the panel, as to try to prevent from damaging the buffers or the panel cables. And at this point, I'm trying to align the top of the panel, but because of the tape, it doesn't allow me to be able to move the glass while it's sitting inside the inner frame. Now I'm going around and double checking for alignment, because it does sit, the glass does sit inside of a groove inside the inner panel frame. And once everything is lined up, we can remove our cups, and the hard part's over, or the stressful part. Now we just go ahead and go back and continue with the reassembly. So we're going to reinstall our filament tape on the right and left sides. Then we're going to reinstall our outer frame. Now with this, I install one corner, then slightly line it up with the opposite corner, but not to fully install it, and then install one side, slide the top corner into place, install the other side, and then press it into place like it should be. You can see I'm working across the top and pressing, squeezing it between the panel ribbon cables.
Again, if you need two people to do this, get two people to do this. Me, I'm big enough, I can handle this.
At this point, we're going to go ahead and gently set the buffer, or the buffers, back into the buffer retainers. And then we're going to take our outer frame and we're going to retape it back to the frame, and then remount the frame back to the panel. Now this will take a little bit of massaging to get it into place and get it to clip in. Once it's in, then you can go ahead and put the screws in for the rest of the frame. And what I'm doing at this point is I'm just putting in a couple of key screws to hold the frame in place. So that way when you screw it down and tighten it, it doesn't try to shift on you. This basically tacks the whole frame into place, and then you can go around and reinstall the rest of the screws. Now we'll go ahead and we're going to replace our grounding tape back onto our buffer boards and the panel. This is highly important. Whenever you're moving the set, the bottom is usually the #1 place where you'll touch the set. If the grounding tape isn't in place and you have a very staticky location where the set is installed, there's good odds that you'll take and you'll create an ESD hazard without that tape reinstalled. Now on this particular set, the left side buffer shield has to go on first, because the right side overlaps over the top of the left. Set your buffer shields back into place, and then you can go ahead and screw them down. Do the lower, smaller screws first, and then go ahead and do your larger screws. Try not to drop any screws on the floor, because these are very small. Fortunately for me, I have lots of practice finding small screws on floors. Don't be me, don't drop the screw in the first place. Now that was the lower screws, so we'll go ahead and we'll reinstall the larger upper screws. And the shield buffers are done. Now we'll go ahead and reinstall our T-conn board. There's 2 Phillips head screws that mount this to the back of the panel, and then be sure to reconnect the ribbon cables back to the buffers. These particular cables are long enough that you can do this with the T-conn board mounted. On some sets and some TVs, this is not always the case, and the T-conn to buffer cables are the exact length that they need to be, and so you'll have to do this with the T-conn board not fully mounted. Then go ahead and reinstall your grounding covers for your power supply and reinstall the power supply. Then go ahead and reinstall your right stand mount support. And go ahead and do the same with the right stand mount support. Then you can go ahead and install the wall mount mounting lugs. Then we're going to go ahead and reinstall our wireless card. So we'll remove it from the support frame and install the screw that attaches the support frame to the panel. Reinstall the wireless antenna. And then slide the wireless card back into the support frame. Now we can reinstall our main board. Okay, then we'll go ahead and pull our tape up for our wireless card, attach the wireless card, and then retape the cable back down. Do the same process for the LVDS cable and the main board to power supply cable. Okay, double check all your connections, make sure everything is installed correctly. Make sure nothing's crooked. And then the hard part's really over. Now we can go ahead and reinstall the back panel. As you can see, the speakers and the IR and IR board and the power button are all installed to the back frame or the back panel cover. Lock your top in first, and then go ahead and install your cable connections to the main board. And of course these are color coded, so it does make it slightly simple. And then gently set the cover into place. At this point, I've only put a couple of screws into the cover just to make sure that it works. Plugged it in, turned it on, and yes, we have a picture, so awesome. We don't have to disassemble the set. Now we'll go ahead, put the rest of our screws back into our back panel cover, and reinstall our stands.
Okay, well there you go. One TV fixed in, actually not too bad. I think I did it in about 3 hours. So that's about par for me. Granted, if it's been your first time doing this, it may take you a little bit longer. So like, share, subscribe. Yeah, if you'd like to see more of this content. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please leave those in the comments below. I would expect there to be a fair number of questions about this. If you can take apart a TCL, you can pretty much take apart any TV out there. The only ones that get a little more complicated are going to be the QLEDs from Samsung, and of course an OLED. You can't do this. You can't change the backlight because there isn't one. So that's where it gets a little more complicated. And the new micro LEDs. Haven't done one of those yet. won't probably see one of those for another year or two. So, but yeah, all in all, I mean, realistically, you're talking about, depending on the set, you're anywhere from about $70 to maybe $150 for the backlight set, plus shipping, and a good, maybe half day of your time. Otherwise, your set will be basically good as new. So, if you think you can do this and maybe would like to do it professionally, give us a call. Give us a call, look us up. Links and everything will be posted in the comments below. We're always looking for young, ambitious professionals that would like to learn how to do this and maybe come work for us. We're always looking for TV technicians, especially somebody with the competency to be able to do this. If you've worked on laptops in particular, you can work on one of these. It's actually far simpler than a laptop most of the time. So yeah, if you can work on a laptop competently, or you can work on like small form factor PCs or anything like that, this is a walk in the park for the most part, other than just the size and everything else that kind of goes with a TV and the logistics. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I'll leave this on for at least a good half an hour, just to make sure that we don't have any issues with it at all. Other than that, it looks really good. And then we'll get it back to the customer. It's got a nice about 3-hour drive, 3-hour ride to get it back to the customer. So manufacturer will always tell you to transport these vertically. If for some reason you ever have to transport these laying down, make sure it's laying on its back, not on its front. If you lay it on the front, there is nothing to support the screen if you bounce down the road, and you can take a good chance at damaging the screen. If you lay it down on its back, the little not glass, but the little acrylic pegs that hold the diffuser up will support the screen, and it will ride nice and comfortably to wherever you want to go, assuming you don't hit the brakes at 80 miles an hour and it goes sliding into the back of your truck. So, otherwise, you're great. So again, thank you for watching, and we'll catch you on the next one. Bye for now.